Hey there, and welcome to day 13 of 31 Days of Horror. Sorry for the little delay in uploading. I honestly just haven't felt like recording my opinions about the movies I've been watching, but I have been watching them, and I'm feeling motivated to give my opinions today. So, for day 13 of 31 Days of Horror, I checked out another PG-13 horror movie. And part of this is because I'm always on the search. Like I said in a previous video, I'm always on the search for something with the spooky vibes and um, the good storytelling, but not necessarily all of the violence and the swearing, because a lot of these things open up the ability then for younger people to be introduced into horror. So I'm a big fan of that. So today we're talking about the movie Tarot. This movie is currently streaming on Netflix. That's where I watched it. And I honestly have to say, I go into PG-13 horror movies always with the same expectation. I don't expect them to be good, but I don't expect them to be bad. And I always hope for something new, something different, something enjoyable. And I have to say, honestly, that I really do think that if you're a casual horror fan, if you just love watching things for the spooky season, but maybe you're not into gore and you're not into, a lot of the things in a more traditional sense of horror, I think Tarot might actually be a really good outing for quite a few people. And I also think outing is a really great offering for that area of adolescence where a lot of people really want to get into horror, but they may still have parental restrictions and not be allowed to watch the R-rated movies quite. I think Tarot is actually a really great film for that group of individuals. And the cool thing about that is that my main criticism of PG-13 horror movies is that so many times they have a great story, but the story that they want to tell lends itself a little bit more to an R rating because there are harsher aspects to that story. But in them trying to fit it within a PG-13 rating, they kind of dumb things down, round the edges on things that should be sharp. They kind of make certain things shiny that should really not be. And because they're trying to appeal to a little bit of a younger crowd, but they're also trying to not push the envelope too far to lose an audience. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that a lot of times the subject matter is a bit too mature for younger audiences to vibe with. And when I say vibe with, I don't necessarily mean they can't understand it, but it's not significant to them. It's not significant to their current, life experience or where their head's at right now. It may be a little bit too mature. Like it may be subject matter that you would really only be interested in if you were an adult or at a different, more mature place in your life. So that doesn't often hold the younger generation's interest with the PG-13 horror movies. And then they're also curated more towards that younger audience. So then the older, more mature audience that would gravitate more towards that story, or that story would be more impactful for, isn't interested in the film because of the changes that are made to make it more appropriate for a younger crowd. So a lot of the PG-13 horror movies end up in this terrible limbo of they don't really belong anywhere. There's not an audience for them. And then studios get upset and they're like, I don't understand why this failed. And it's because you didn't make this movie for anyone. You tried so hard to kind of make it, oh, well, adults would be interested because it's about parenting, but it's only PG-13 and it's got violence, and we'll stick this celebrity that we know kids like in here and it'll be great. But when you have the audiences come together, there's nothing really to enjoy. And Tarot, I think, started out that way. I will say that when you're first watching this movie, it has a pretty typical setup. Nothing is particularly unexpected. A bunch of friends rent a house, kind of Airbnb style for one of their birthdays. They get a little belligerent. They break into an off-limits area of their rental property, and they happen to find a really scary, spookily drawn, horribly old, probably shouldn't touch it set of tarot cards. And of course, because no movie would be complete without having a complete expert in whatever subject you need with you at all times, there is one of the members of their group who is super into tarot and really knows how to do readings. And she's, does not want to do the readings with these cards because she's pointed out that doing a reading with somebody else's tarot deck in the tarot community is actually bad luck and it's frowned upon. It's rude. Because there's a personal connection between the person who reads tarot and their cards. The cards need to be able to speak freely to them, and they will not necessarily speak freely if they're not familiar with you. Is kind of the vibes that go along with why you shouldn't use other people's tarot decks. And this kind of goes along with, my last video when I was talking about the craft legacy. I think almost every girl I know growing up has had an astrology phase, a witchcraft phase, a tarot phase, palm reading, being into psychics, we've all dabbled, I think. Some people I know are still very invested in this. In fact, one of my good friends, he's actually a medium. For me, it's not it's something that I've done tarot card readings. I've learned star charts. I've done, things like that in my past. I couldn't do it off the top of my head. So if I was at a rental property and somebody was like, "Oh, hey, we found tarot cards," I'd be like, "Put that shit back where it came from." And I don't know how to do that. So anyway, they do readings, and then in typical, horror movie fashion, people start dying in the way, according to their readings. And I think it's at this point in the film where the filmmakers realized this is bad and it's not gonna go anywhere good. And so instead of just kind of staying the course, continuing to make a serious movie, and ending up in PG-13 horror movie hell, they decided to lean into it. And the only other movie that I can speak on that did a similar thing is years ago, Snakes on a Plane. They started developing this movie, they were making the movie, they cast Samuel L. Jackson, and the internet got a hold of the fact that Samuel L. Jackson was going to be in a movie called Snakes on a Plane, and that it was supposed to be a horror movie. And the internet kind of just ran wild making fun of this. And this was well before regular meme culture, this was before the internet made them make Sonic the Hedgehog better. And this made the filmmakers of Snakes on a Plane realize their movie wasn't going to be good, so they should make it fun and they should do what fans are looking to see. And then of course that's how you get Samuel L. Jackson's classic line, "I've had it with these snakes on this plane." And I'm trying to keep it a little PG in here, but we're all familiar. I have to say personally, Snakes on a Plane is one of my, I don't necessarily want to call it a comfort film, but whenever I have the opportunity to watch it, I'm never disappointed. It's always a fun time. It's always an enjoyable movie. And that song by Cobra Starship is catchy. I will now have that stuck in my head for the rest of forever. Anyway, so back to Tarot. Tarot at this point realized their movie's not going to be good. And so they moved in a good direction, I think, for a film like this. And they didn't necessarily go full on comedy, which is good. But they didn't necessarily go full on meta either. They just had characters saying lines in the film that you could literally hear people at home saying. like, they're connecting the dots. Oh my God, they're dying based on my predictions. And it's like, do you not hear yourself? Like, you're reaching. What does that have to do with anything? That's going like, oh my God, the grass is always greener. There's a green book over there. It has to be the clue. Those kinds of things. So it made the movie more enjoyable because it wasn't trying to be something new. While I was watching the film, when it started and it was, they were in the rental property and they, broke into that room they weren't supposed to be in and they were going through things. It was very, very reminiscent of Cabin in the Woods, of the scene where they go down in the basement and they're looking at all the different artifacts that's going to kind of decide their fate. There's almost an identical scene in this, and that's where they find this tarot card box. And for me, being perfectly honest, if I was in a place that wasn't my own and I discovered a creepy basement full of a bunch of like creepy, like witchcraft stuff, and even if it just looked like totally museum curated, like nobody was doing anything untoward here, I wouldn't touch anything. I'm not particularly superstitious. I don't really believe in like ghosts and magic and curses and all of that stuff. But I do know that throughout history, there have been a lot of materials used in older like paints and finishes with metals and things like that are also very toxic to people, and the longer that they sit, the worse that they can be. I mean, we've all heard about lead paint and people eating lead paint chips, making them, I mean, now we have microplastics, but before it was lead paint. Just knowing those things already makes me go, if I don't know where this stuff came from, I don't know who it belongs to, I don't know why it's here, and it like looks old and it's got some like carvings in it, and there's anything having to do with stars or moons or whatever, don't touch it. So of course they do, and it turns out that the tarot deck is cursed and whatnot, and none of those things are surprising. None of those things are new or different concepts that we've seen. Now, tarot card is an interesting thing that we don't explore very often. I mean, in horror movies employ psychics and that kind of, and like mediumship and seances and stuff like that fairly often, but I don't think tarot cards are used quite as often as other things. And so it's kind of nice to see them have their own outing. But I do think, unfortunately, they leaned a little bit more into the scare factors with the tarot things than they did actually with tarot, because I think tarot itself could definitely lend itself to a lot of different aspects of horror. And it doesn't have to do with scary pictures coming to life. Because a lot of what tarot is about not necessarily like reading your future, like predicting things. A lot of it is just telling you things that you kind of internally know, but you're not paying attention to, and it kind of brings those things to the forefront, and it makes you aware of how those things can affect you. And the neat thing is that this movie really did kind of play on that. I just think it's kind of unfortunate because I think that's going to get overlooked a little bit because of the other things and because of the other aspects of the movie. Now, when the tarot card predictions start, in people in the movie, it felt very much so like Final Destination, and not like the good Final Destinations, like the later entries where you're like, oh, they're just trying to come up with more convoluted stuff now. Like, this is a whole Rube Goldberg machine. This isn't like a guy slipped in the shower and died. This is, like this bolt has to come out, this guy has to walk by. And so it gets a little convoluted. And this felt the same way. And like I said, and then it got to a certain point in the film, and I think the film realized, like, we're silly. So then you had characters vocalizing cool things, like, why are you making these connections? Why are you going to see this stranger? You don't know her? Like, you just called her. You can't show up at people's houses in the middle of the night. Like, all of the things that us as the audience would be saying are now things that are introduced into the film. And I think the movie actually had a very satisfying ending. Um, and it's also one of my criticisms in horror a lot, and especially, like I said, like the PG-13 outings, is that the endings ruin it. Um, even if they've come up with something good, they've come up with something enjoyable. Everybody's always trying for that one last scare at the end of a movie, and a lot of times that one last scare just undermines everything you've done through this movie to this point. And this movie avoided that. Um, I think it had a good ending. I think it had a logical ending for the movie. Do I think it was the best movie I've ever seen? No. Will I watch it again? Probably not. But I do think that once my own child is older, if he's interested in the more spooky things, if he's still interested in scary movies and things like that, then I definitely think when he's older that it would be one that I would recommend that we watch together. But I would love to hear what you think. It seems to be one of the more popular movies this year. I've seen, like Elvis the Alien did a review of it, and I've seen other like YouTubers comment about it, and I've seen a lot of people watching it. It's one of the top movies on Netflix. So I'd love to hear what you think if you want to comment down below. Or feel free to subscribe if you want to see more videos. I am working on them. I just work on them at my own pace because I really only do this for myself. I'm pretty much talking to just me. Um, and a lot of this is just so that I can get, my opinions out of my head and, kind of move on to the next thing for me to enjoy. So I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Talk to you later.